You know, I've been calling my friends all around the world in the US, Europe, and other places. Nobody knows what's going on in Iran. And I was asking myself this question: why is the world so silent about Iran? Do you guys ever wonder, does anybody know what's going on in Iran? Explained by an Iranian. People ask a simple question: why was the world so loud about Gaza, but suddenly so quiet about Iran? Why is that? Why are the same voices that scream about oppression now completely silent? Why is that? The answer is not ignorance. It's not a lack of information. It's something much, much deeper. To understand it, you need to understand two different ways of seeing the world: the reality and the imagined reality, or the hallucinated or illusion. In the real world that we know of, oppression follows power. Everybody agrees with that one. At the very top are the authoritarian regimes like the Islamists, dictatorships, socialist strongman, security state with prisons, guns, and execution list. Now, below them are the people. Iranians living under terror, for example, is a very good example. Venezuelans starving under economic collapse. Cubans silenced by fear. Entire population punished for dissent. Whoever argues is killed, destroyed, put in prison, and executed. This hierarchy is very simple. Those with power oppress those without it. That is reality. I think everybody agrees on that one. Now, here's the illusion, that imagined world, that hallucinated world, right? This is where things break, by the way, so imagine yourself. Not everyone sees the world as it is. Some people have been ideologically conditioned to see a different hierarchy, most likely at a very young age. Now, in their world, the West is always the oppressor, like United States of America, Israel. And anyone who opposes the West must therefore be oppressed. That's how they believe it. So regimes that jail women, kill protesters, starve citizens, and shut down the internet are magically rebranded as victims. Not because of what they do, but because of who they oppose. Think about that for a little bit. This is not, by the way, I don't want you to think this is some sort of analysis or narrative loyalty. Nothing to do with that at all. Think of it as an upside down map. Okay, if you like geography. Imagine being taught geography at a very young age using a map that is completely upside down, right? You have north is south, and then land is water, oceans are continents. You were taught at a very young age, this is how the world looks, right? Everything you learn feels consistent. Every conclusion feels logical. And anyone who shows you a real map is accused of lying. That's how the illusion works, by the way. Same world, same facts, but inverted meaning. Now, ask yourself this question: who falls into this illusion, right? Here's the uncomfortable truth that not many people accept. The people most likely to believe the illusion are the people furthest from real sufferings, right? They don't know that Iranians who were beaten or killed on the streets, innocent people. They don't know Venezuelans who lost everything. They don't know Cubans executed by firing squads. They don't know Israelis were massacred in their own homes. They don't know Ukrainians being erased by war. Distance from reality creates the luxury to hallucinate morality. Think about that for a second. Ironically, the people who claim to be against privilege are often the most people from the consequences of their beliefs. Let me say it a different way. This is how people who claim to be anti-privilege end up with ultimate privilege, the privilege of never facing real tyranny. Why they cannot speak about Iran? That's the question I ask myself. Now we reach the silence. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If they believe that the Islamic regime, the corrupted Islamic regime, is oppressing Iranians, their entire worldview collapses. Because in their hierarchy, their own beliefs, these regimes are only bad because of Western pressure, sanctions, imperialism, history selectively remembered, right? If they admit the truth, they must also admit something else. That terrorism is not resistance, that censorship is not liberation, that dictatorship does not become moral just because it opposes the West. And that would retroactively expose years of false activism. All of a sudden they're like, what? This is against my beliefs. So they stay quiet. That's what they do. But embrace yourself for this one, is going to get worse. Silence alone cannot sustain an illusion. Illusion is extremely fragile and it must be defended. And when Iranians say, when Persians say, these people, the governments are killing us, when Venezuelans say the policies are starving us, those voices are not welcomed at all. They're treated as noise. Static interferences trying to penetrate into this illusion bubble of their own imagined reality. So the suffering is minimized, mocked, and then denied, or reframed. The oppressed are erased to protect the story. That's how it works, right? The smoke alarm problem, I want you to think of this analogy, right? Oppression, just imagine oppression is fire. In the real world, when someone screams fire, 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 you look for what? For flames, right? In the illusion, the smoke alarm is blamed for being too loud. So instead of putting out the fire, guess what they do? They disconnect the alarm. They're like, pull the plug. I don't want to hear it anymore. That's what happens to Iranian voices. That's what happened to Venezuelan voices, to anyone who's suffering, contradicts the narrative. They don't like that. Now here's the problem with human species, the Homo sapiens, right? The ego over humanity. This is the darkest part. The human ego will sacrifice truth to protect identity. Think about that for just a moment. And it will sacrifice even humans to protect the story. That's how people who claim to stand with the oppressed end up silencing them. Not because they're cruel, but because admitting reality will shatter, will destroy who they think they are, their identity. They can't handle that. The truth is this. Oppression is not about geography. It's about power. If a government fears speech, it is not oppressed. If it shuts down the internet, it's not resisting. If it kills dissent, it is the oppressor, no matter what flag it waves. That's why the world is silent about Iran. Not because the truth is unclear, but because the truth destroys the illusion. And that's why people and media is silent about what is happening in Iran and many other countries around the world. Think about that.